What is a green flag you've experienced on a first date that made you want to have a second date?
We talked about everything and the conversation never dulled. Everyone at the party left, and we were the only two people there and didn't realize it for a while. 25 years later, and we're still running our mouths.
We had been dating about 6 months and she showed up at my apartment with a homemade cake on my birthday. It might sound like no big deal to some people, but I had never dated a girl who cared about my birthday. I almost dropped to my knees and cried when I opened the door.
When my girlfriend and I had our first date, her mom sent her with $50. Just in case I made her pay, I guess. And since I paid, she made the waiter cry by tipping him the whole $50. Apparently he was having a bad day.
On our third date, we watched a movie at his place. He remembered that on our first date, I ordered a Dr. Pepper with my meal and a chocolate chip cookie for dessert. He had Dr. Peppers for me in the fridge and made me homemade chocolate chip cookies. He burned them, but I married him 2 years later anyways.
She came to my door and my puppy got excited. Without skipping a beat, she scooped up the dog and asked where the three of us were going. That was 19 years ago. Puppy is gone, but we've stuck together through hell and back.
Not first date, but the moment I knew I was gonna marry this man. We went grocery shopping. It was about 9 p.m., we had both just been paid. The young lady in line in front of us had a very young baby, and was paying with WIC coupons and a food stamp EBT card. Her total came to about $22, and she was holding a $20. She looked dejected, and put back the one and only thing that was probably her splurge, a candy bar and an energy drink. Other than that, she had baby food, diapers, chicken, rice, bananas, formula, wipes, the bare minimum. I turned around to tell my now husband to hand me my wallet. I didn't have to. He already had his out, took out a $50 bill, handed it to her and told her to keep the change. He changed her week, he changed my life. That was the moment I knew he was it for me.
On my first date with my past girlfriend, she saw someone struggling with a cart at the park we were at. A vendor closing up their food stand for the day. And she got ready to leap up from the grass where we were sitting to go help the person. No hesitation, no questions, no qualms about rudeness towards me, which it wasn't, nothing. Just this springboard of instant human recognition and kindness. Just then the vendor got her cart over the bump she was struggling with and my ex sat back down. But I saw it play out many times after that. If there was a struggle or suffering, she stood up to stand in the gap. She was absolutely one of those people. No questions asked. And she had a gentle, humorous way of putting people at total ease so that they would accept her help. That first date, I knew. And I told her about it afterwards. She could not understand why I thought this was so important or why I was so impressed, as the truly good and kind do. But I had spent several years in an earlier time period with a selfish, self-involved, and occasionally cruel man. I knew what the opposite of that looked like. I knew how the opposite of that could twist a person. I knew what it was like struggling myself. And I knew she was a keeper. Because she didn't do it to impress me. She didn't look to me first. She didn't elaborately ask me for permission to excuse herself to go help. She just saw it and jumped up. We eventually split for reasons that had nothing to do with that. But it was and still is one of the most important relationships of my life. And her trustworthy human kindness was never and still is never in question about her.
First date, she was driving us to a spot to go hiking, about an hour's drive. We're talking and talking, but every once in a while we wouldn't be talking, and it just felt so comfortable and not awkward being silent together.
We stayed at the wine bar much longer than planned, and we were trying to race to a restaurant for food before places closed. So, I offered her a piggyback ride to run it, due to her wearing heels. She jumped on, threw her arm forward and yelled, "Onward!" We didn't make it to the restaurant in time, but did end up at the nearby diner for a few more hours. Been married just past 3 years now, and leaving for our honeymoon.
He made it clear it was a date and that he was interested without it ever feeling creepy or like he was pressuring me for anything. We talked for hours, went from restaurant to walking up and down the river to my place for a beer, then I offered for him to stay over but on a mattress on the floor. I was in a studio with no couch, not in my bed, and he wasn't pushy about anything more happening. The first few weeks he was always sweet and respectful but made it so clear that he was interested in a relationship, no back and forth or second guessing. And now we're married.
I asked if she wanted to go to McDonald's and split some fries because that's all I could afford at the time. She said sure. We talked a long time and split a large fries, and she was so chill about it. She wanted to be with me, anywhere would have been okay. I knew if she was willing to go out with a broke and struggling me, she would also be willing to build a life with me from the ground up. We have been married 35 years, through ups and downs, kids, sickness, wealth and poverty.
He took me to an amateur stand-up comedy night. He was heartily laughing at all the jokes. They were so bad. So not funny at all. I was planning to not go on another date with him because he obviously has a bad sense of humor. As we were walking to the car, he commented how bad everyone was, but he wanted to encourage them, so he laughed at everyone's jokes. We've been married for 12 years now.
Among other things, we talked about books, and at some point I asked for some recommendations. He said he had to think about it, but I didn't expect him to actually do. The next day he texted me a list of his favorite books, showing that he had been really thinking about me and that he didn't care about those weird texting rules, that you shouldn't text the day after a date so you won't seem too eager. Also, just the fact that he wanted to talk about books.
The date was supposed to just be getting a drink or two. We stayed until the place was closing down, and even then the date wasn't over. We watched Donnie Darko and he made us cookies. We've been together for almost 10 years and married for 5. Everyone should have someone they're unwilling to say goodbye to.
Maybe didn't end as happy as most of these, as in I didn't end up marrying the guy. But back in high school, a friend of mine got stood up on a date and asked me if I could just come down to the restaurant because he felt embarrassed and felt awkward leaving. The staff had felt incredibly bad about it and kept trying to reassure him the date would come. So I said sure, why not? I had nothing better to do on a Sunday night. So I dressed nice and went down there, told the hostess that I was so sorry but I was running late for my date, and oh, there he is. And sat down with him. It was this little fancy pizza joint, and we actually had a blast trying to fool the staff into thinking I was actually his date. He offered to pay, but I kept insisting. When the waitress came back with the machine, he took my card from me and paid with his own instead so I wouldn't. It was fun, and I got to know him better as a friend. Felt natural. He ended up walking me home even though I lived further than him. He lived like down the street from the place. He got a call from his real date on the way home and he just hung up on her, gave me a hug, goodbye, and waited until I was inside the house before he left. He later told me his date was calling to tell him she wasn't actually interested in him at all and she just said yes to the date because she felt bad. He showed me the texts. I let him know I actually had a lot of fun with him and suggested we hang out more. He started being awkward with me for a couple of days, and then let it slip that going on that date with me made him realize he had some feelings for me and wanted to go on another one. I just said, "Thank God you said something," because I didn't know how to say it. The green flag was just the fun we had, and how it didn't feel forced, I guess. Like it was just fun, and he actually listened to me, asked questions, and wanted to get to know me better. It wasn't awkward at all. It felt like a real date even though it was impromptu. We did end up going on another date, just a walk in the park. We held hands. I kissed him on the cheek. Never actually made things official because he had this rule about 3 dates before that. But we ended up just staying friends after the 3rd date. We realized our friendship was something we didn't want to ruin by becoming a couple. We remained good friends until we graduated, but lost touch when he moved to a different city. Still see him from time to time when he comes in to visit family, and we always joke about those dates. He's got a lovely fiancée now, and I'm incredibly happy for him.
I guess our first date was sneaking off together for a walk at the place we worked together. Shortly after, we ended up dating in secret until we announced our engagement, to our boss's displeasure. We were walking around the grounds together and she kept running off ahead slightly to look at specific groups of flowers and remarking about which one she liked the most, and how beautiful they all were. Then she'd realize she had left me behind and would come back, and walk with me over to them so she could look at them some more with me. It was adorable, and she's still just as adorable today. I don't think I'd ever seen someone so excited about flowers. We've been married 4 years now.
I met my current boyfriend on Tinder and I had basically little to no expectations that this would go anywhere because, well, it's Tinder. We ended up chatting on the app before he gave me his phone number, and he ended up asking me if I wanted to hang out the next day, and I said sure. We live in Finland 10 minutes away from the Swedish border, so we drove over to the Sweden side. He said he needed to get some groceries, alcohol, and gas for the car, so we did that before driving back over to the Finnish side. He dropped me back off at my place and said he really hoped he could see me again. Well, fast forward to later that night, he called me and asked if I wanted to see him again because he really enjoyed my company and wanted to keep hanging out. He apologized for the less than exciting grocery/gas/alcohol run date earlier, but I said I didn't mind. I said I had a good time and that I wanted to see him again too. We ended up driving to his cabin in the evening, and it was so romantic. It was freezing cold, as it usually is in Finnish Lapland in winter, and we just cuddled and talked all night. I really love him so much, and I have a sneaking suspicion he's going to propose soon.
We're coworkers, and we started flirting after a while of friendship. I dressed casually for a date, aka white dress shirt, blue jeans, and my date shoes. She showed up all dressed up and couldn't walk in her heels. She ended up falling over and scraping her knee. I helped her up and got my extra pair of shoes I keep in the car and some socks for her, put them on for her and bandaged her knee up from my first aid kit. Dinner was great. We bounced off of each other. When it was over and we split the bill, she was insistent on it. I was gonna pay for it since I asked for the date. I walked her to her car and she kissed me on the cheek. I asked for the second date right then and there. We've been together for a year and a half. Her family loves me, especially because her mother loves my cooking. My family gushes over her. I really think we'll go somewhere, and if we do, I couldn't ask for a better partner.
He spoke in a British accent the first 30 minutes of our date. I had to stop him at some point to ask if he was nervous, and this goofball was perplexed. How did you know? Sir, you have been doing a voice for a hot minute now. Anyways, I love him and I'm going to marry him soon, so I suggest you all find yourself a man who does voices. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed my video, do like and subscribe and check out my other videos. If you want, you can support me on Patreon from below, where I post wholesome content every day to raise funds for my dad's ongoing tumor treatment. Have an absolutely fantastic day, my friend.